that there are other things that are more important. And not only that, if you understand the concept of time in African countries, not that all African cultures are the same, but time is implicit in an event. There's no time apart from the event. They go together. So if you have clients who are African, you have to train them if you're operating by the clock, because they may not get there. I got around that. I couldn't use the technique all the time because I'm same as most of you who are in private practice, bound by the clock and being paid by insurance companies. But I would set aside Saturdays and usually one other day of the week where I would experiment with clients and serve them whenever they got there, and not be bound by the clock. That's a tremendous adjustment. Although I think that there are some things about people of African descent that you can incorporate into your practice, in spite of the fact that the time is such an important element, and they may not be able to make the adjustment. But some things that I have in here that are extremely important in working with clients who are black. First, I have the process of becoming black. Black is in this country has a lot to do with state of mind. I think black is also an ethnic group. And achieving that state of mind is a very slow evolutionary process. One cannot go from being a Negro or colored to black by making a declaration or changing your clothes. A dashiki does not make you black. It's a state of mind, it's an attitude. And it evolves over time as a result of experience in a society with people who are not like us. And the process of going from Negro or color to being black, a person needs to be exposed to a new consciousness. And that's by reading, by being exposed to people. For example, the giants in psychology, some of you know Naim Akbar, Wade Nobles, Joe Baldwin, who recently died in Tallahassee in FAMU, Linda James Myers at University of Ohio. But you have to read those people, and I know all of them, so you get involved with them, and you listen to them talk, and you listen to what they're doing, and before you know it, you begin to wonder about what it is that you're doing, and how you're doing it, and how effective is it. So this process of Negro to black is very important. It takes time. And it's not automatic.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How do you think it is for the younger people in terms of going from Negro to black? Like, let's say in faith generation. How do you see that different from maybe how it was for you or for me?
It's a difference that I have noticed because younger people are freer. They view each other more as humans than a particular color. They just get along better. They get along better. However, I have a very strong attitude about that. If someone my age tells me that they don't see my color, I have a stroke. Because telling me that you don't see color is denying my existence. Now that does not apply to my granddaughter and people, younger people, because they're different. I just watch them, they relate, you know, and oh my God, dating. You know, I could
new day, Dad, I know, it's a new day.
I could not deal with that. But you have to understand where I'm coming from.
Yes.
I have had to ride the back of the bus. I remember when houses and jobs in the city of Newark were advertised by race. I remember I lived during the days when there was not a major city in these United States where black people could get an accommodation in a hotel. I've been on a bus, where you had to walk past 20 empty seats in front to get to the back of the bus to sit into the row of seats that was reserved for black people. I'm a highly educated man. I can accept people as they present themselves. However, I can tell you, I am very uncomfortable around white people. Very uncomfortable. I'm aware of it, so I can handle it. But we don't have the same interests, you know. And if they talk, they talk about something that is stupid. I used to tell when I supervise clinical psychologists, white students, I used to suggest to them, don't ever ask a black patient, do you mind working with me? Or working with somebody white. That is absurd. If you have an analytic orientation, it's easier to handle it because in the transference, you will be able to make some interpretation and deal with that. But if you ask me, do I mind working with you, you've got a problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask it, you know? But young people, my granddaughter's age, are very different, and I don't make a judgment about that. They're in the world probably as it ought to be. Not as it is, but as it ought to be. And you can't change me because I'm too damn old.
Can I just say something also about that? I think as someone who works on a college campus, I do agree with you in terms of young people, how they see each other, but the racism is very real.
Sure.
And what makes me nervous for them, and it is part of the work, is it really knocks them over when they experience it. Because things are just, I don't want to say, they're different now in terms of how it's being expressed. And maybe they're dating, and maybe they're, you know, joining white frats and sororities and all this other kind of stuff. But the ugliness is still there. And it's just hidden, and it's in a different place.
The more things change, the more they remain the same.
Correct, and I feel like our young people are extra vulnerable because they don't see it coming.
Yeah.
Where we sort of, our parents sent us off to school with, you know, training around that.
They're not prepared.
They're not prepared for it, that's, thank you.
Let me give you some examples of color in the family. I have two, three cases here. Case number one, interracial adoption. A male black child living in a residential setting was adopted by a white family. The child had a relationship with his birth mother for a while. I don't know to what degree they were bonded to each other, but she put the kid up for adoption. And he was placed in this home. And these were good people. I'm not saying anything negative about these white people. They were good and very insightful. The mother recognized that she could not do anything with this child in terms of color problem. So somehow she found me. I don't know how the hell she found me, but she found me. And this boy, and the reason she brought the child to me is he announced to his mother that he did not want to be black. Mother recognized she couldn't do anything about that. So she brought him to me. And this was a family of good people, and I try to be very gentle with them, who saw people as people, and that, you know, I damn near hit the roof when she said that she didn't see color. Because what she didn't recognize was that in older black people, that's a denial of the person's existence. But these were good people, and I don't make a negative judgment about it. But anyway, I tried to teach her some things about, from a sociological point of view, the plight of black people in this country and in most countries in the Western world. And there came about 3 or 4 sessions. Well, let me tell you about the boy. This boy was integrated into this family. There was no question about it. These people loved this child. And she did not treat him any different than she treated her own children. This kid used to come to therapy to me and rub mine. It's a black boy now. He'd rub at mine like this comes off. And he would stand close to me, and if you do therapy with children, children always find a way to get close to you, quote unquote. Always find a way to get close to you. Either literally or figuratively, they get close to you. And so this boy would come and he was just fascinated with me. I had toys and I would get down on the floor and I would play with him and I would talk to him. But the frame of reference was different. The frame of reference was black. And so I used to talk to the mother, and I try to point out to her that if this boy stays in therapy, as he begins to make an adjustment to being black, you are going to become a problem to him. And I guess they couldn't survive that because they came about 4 sessions and stopped coming. I probably scared them to death. I didn't, but the woman was very insightful, very bright family. There was no question that this boy was in a loving home. He just could not deal with the rejection, what he saw as rejection. So they stopped coming. But in the second family, there was a family who adopted a black girl. Very insightful people. These people adopted this black child. They joined a black church and took this child to this black church, and they became members of that church. This was probably the only truly integrated situation that I've ever encountered. This child became familiar with 2 cultures. The white culture because the family was white, and a black church because they took her to church, black valleys because they took her to a black church and joined and became members of organizations within that church. This child never had any obvious emotional problems, well adjusted in school, an honor student, and went to law school, ultimately went to law school and became a lawyer. And these parents were responsible for her success. They treated her. On the other hand, I have a problem with interracial adoption. The problem is that at some point in life, this child or this person is going to have to make an adjustment, going to have to adjust to being black. And how do you adjust to being black if you don't know anything about being black? I had a case, an example of a young black boy from Seton Hall, raised in South Jersey. His friends, who were always all white, came to Seton Hall and experienced color shock. He had never seen so many black people before. And they sent him over to me. I don't know why the hell they always find me. Sent him over to me, and I don't think he could tolerate the things that I talked about with him, because he also stopped coming. I should remind you of something. Unlike Eurocentric psychology, if I do not succeed with a client who comes to me voluntarily, the fault lies within me, not the client. It is either my personality or it is the technique that I'm using. You're not going to read that in the literature, because in the literature, Eurocentric literature, they refer to it as resistance or transference. The fault always lies with the client, and I don't view my failure with the client as rarely residing with the client. It's always me. There's something about me, or something about the technique that is not working. So I went all these years without finding out what that was, and so I became active in ABPsi and listened to all these people that you've read talk and write about culture and how important it is. So, but I had to retire, and it's too bad because I'm out of the loop now. I don't really have much time left being 85. And I certainly don't practice. I don't have a license anymore, and I don't belong to NJ ABPsi, and I do not belong to APA. That's history. And the things that I'm concluding are probably good for me, that I made the discovery before I died. But I can't pass it on because I'm not supervising anybody, you know, and young people don't want to hear what you have to say anyway.
You're passing it on, Dr. Danie. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you mind if we ask questions as you go
No,
along, or do you
go
want
ahead.
to start? In listening to you mention about becoming friends with clients, I was a little intrigued by hearing you say that, which is like antithetical to what you're taught, you know, what is considered to be appropriate. Can you speak a little bit more about how that happens? What happens in that dynamic when you become friends with your clients, Black clients?
The way two friends relate. I don't lose my position as a person who's lived longer and has more knowledge, but, pardon me, I view clients and people as my equal. Everybody is my equal. I have more education than some people, but I am not different from a person because of my training and experience. So I relate. So like I relate to my girls. These are friends of mine. You know, there's a limitation. You those of you who do therapy know that you've got to have limitations in therapy. Even the client has to understand the limitations. But even within those limitations, you can be friends. You know, I have people who would call me, and we talk on the phone about a problem. Now with the communication that we have, the sending text messages and email, I get it all the time. And I don't mind it. I view that as the responsibility of older people to relate to younger people in a way that's going to help them. You don't try to put your values on people who are younger, but if they ask you about something, give them your opinion. You know, people can't behave beyond their persuasion. What you know is always reflected in your behavior. So if I have a person who's doing something that is not, in his or her judgment, not good for them, I can't change anybody's behavior directly. But if I give them some knowledge that they don't have, knowledge is power, and knowledge changes behavior. You can tell what a person knows by watching how they behave. If they don't know anything, they behave that way. But it's not that difficult because I like people. I probably on an unconscious level probably enjoy being a source of information for people too. That's the ego.
Yeah.
You know, but most people, not all, sometimes people don't like you, they take an instant dislike to you. That doesn't happen most of the time. And I can tell you, those of you who do therapy, it's not an Africa decision, but the description, what they use in analytics. The more disturbed people are, the better able they are to read you like a book. I had clients walk in and say to me, "You don't like me."
And what do you say?
My impulse has always been to say, "You're damn right." But I would never say that because that's destructive. The point is, if too many people tell me that they don't like me, that I need therapy, there's something going on in me that I'm not aware of, that the patient picks it up. You cannot fool the patient. And I'll tell you something else about therapy. I can tell you something else about therapy too. You cannot take a client or patient any place where you either have not been or are afraid to go. If you have not been in therapy, you can't do therapy. If you don't have insight into yourself, patients, clients can stimulate feelings in you that are so difficult to handle. Knowledge is power. If you understand your upbringing, if you understand what your comings off, you can make adjustments. The biggest struggle I've had over the years is not transmitting my anger to young black males. I'm a very angry man, and you know it. However, I have insight into it, so it's harmless. It comes out sometimes in attitudes that I have. But it's an awesome responsibility to be aware of yourself and not transmit your negative feelings or your anger to somebody black with whom you are working. And everybody black should be leading, therapists rather, should be leading a life that's reasonably satisfying, sexually and otherwise. If you're not, you can make demands on patients or clients that are just crazy. Crazy. For example, if I have a tremendous need to be successful as a patient, I can transmit to a client with whom I'm working the idea that you ought to get well because I need you to get well. That indicates that I know what I'm doing. That's crazy. Client is not there to meet my needs. Client is there because he or she has a problem. You know, but to your question again, it's not difficult to relate to people as friends if you recognize that as people who are black. I don't care how educated we are all in the same boat. What happens to a kid in the city of Newark or East Orange or Jersey City could happen to anybody in this room. And if it hasn't happened, you're just lucky. You know? So it doesn't happen to those people over there. It could also happen to me. You know, for example, I used to ride around, and I don't do it too often now, but I used to ride around because black males are being killed by policemen. I used to ride around with my license and registration in the seat of my car, so that I would not have to reach for it. Because if you reach for it, the reason for that is that my anger can easily be stimulated by policemen, and they will shoot you. So you have to have that insight. But your question again, it's not difficult being friendly if you recognize that we're all in the same boat. For example, I don't make any distinction about middle-class black people and lower-class black people. I think that's absurd. White people react to all of us the same. Don't care how educated you are, how much money you got, or what position, even Oprah Winfrey. They react to all of us the same way, if you recognize that you can handle it with it. Now, this does not apply to my granddaughter, because this is a generation of people. I'm just amazed when I watch them because they're so different. They are so different. They are more human and more humane. And you know, so I don't make a judgment about that. I talk to her sometimes, trying to ask things that I don't know. But,
Can I comment? Or ask a question? Since we have 5 generations, it would really be nice to hear, because I think you're right, we can't speak for younger people, but I believe that because you, the elders, that you have sown so deeply, that we have benefited greatly. And I think that it's because of what you've sown that we are now in the community, at the table with NJPA, at the table with the board, that this woman is on her way to graduate school. And I think that so I think the level or the type of racism changes, it transforms. So it's much more subtle, sophisticated, it's very different. I think you have access, I imagine, I'm thinking, because you know what you think. So I'm thinking that you have access to a lot of resources that maybe my generation didn't, but I still think that race comes up for you. I would imagine that race comes up for young people. It's just much more subtle. It's different.
But see, there are.
Yeah, so I don't think we should buy into that. Yeah, we can't buy, I mean, do you buy into that?
There's a script that people follow. There's a male-female script, and there's a black-white script. And people tend to follow the script until they gain insight into it. I have a son-in-law who's a brigadier general in the Army. He's an orthodontist. if he's wearing his whites, it's not unusual for someone in the clinic to think he's an orderly. Because that's the role, that's the way they see us. And one problem that a lot of a black person being in charge. But let me tell you about the therapeutic process.
Dr. Dan,
Yes.
can I just say something to what you were talking about? Because I just feel like the weighing in comes in on like what you're taught. Because like my mom has taught me to be very aware of what race is and that I'm black. But throughout my life, like you're saying, it's different. So I've never gotten what you've gotten or even what my mom has gotten. I've never experienced somebody viciously do something to me who is white. I've had two experiences. One was a white woman in a whiter town in Maryland took a photo of me and my family, and I felt that's a little off. We were the only kind of black people there. Nothing vicious though. I had an altercation at Rutgers University where my roommate, they were white girls, they called the cops on me because we got into a verbal disagreement. So stuff like that, which is subtle, but it's not vicious. But I've never gotten confused, and I'm not. Say that again?
That's visual subtle.
Yeah, I know. No, yeah.
Especially
It was vicious, but it wasn't. When I say vicious, I mean like physically. Yeah, like I'm not being physically assaulted. I guess what I'm trying to say is like I can see those situations and know what I'm looking at when I see white people do these things because I was raised aware. So like you're saying, it's just, I think the line comes in, you have to be told and you have to be taught. You're black. This is how things kind of go between blacks and whites in the world.
It's in every institution in this country. For example, I have, when I got my diploma in clinical psychology, there were two other people in the department who had a diploma. A department of, I don't know, 20 or 30 people. Only 3 of us had diplomas in clinical psychology. I was never promoted in the psychology department in Montclair State. I got a presidential promotion because I set up the affirmative action office at the university.
That's probably why you didn't get the other promotion. That's why you didn't get it. See that? It all comes out now. That's why you didn't get it.
But hear this out. Everybody knew that I was not the last word in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, but I knew a lot about it. So despite of the fact that I was never promoted, whenever there was a question in the faculty meeting or about clinical psychology, about especially black patients, they'd come to me. But I never got promoted. I'm like, that's a form of racism. You know, and it's good that you were tuned into it. But I recognize from watching some of her friends that we meet, they're very different. Very different. And I would not infect their thinking with mine because I'm an older person and my experiences are different. You know?
Is that an infection?
Hmm?
Is that infecting or is that educating?
I think it's survival, as you mentioned. I think it's survival. For example, Faith cannot even anticipate the discrimination she's going to encounter when she becomes employed as a computer engineer. First of all, nobody black is supposed to be a computer engineer. So people will react to that, you see. But, you know, I think our kids have to know. I think it prepares them to deal with it. But I think this, that we have to draw a line someplace. I don't want younger people to think the way I do because of what I went through, because their experiences are totally different. I think she's much healthier than I was at the same age. Her attitudes are better.
I think it's also developmental. Like what you say to a 7-year-old is not the same thing that you say to an 18-year-old you're sending off to college or, you know, and where you are. I think there's a lot of different, you know, we call it racial socialization, for lack of a better term, but I think it needs to be thought of in multiple contexts, not just linearly.
If you read the African healing, the word psychotherapy would not be used by someone in the African healing, so I had to make an adjustment and use the word healing as opposed to psychotherapy. healing is an awareness of the culture and its impact on its members. You have to know about the micro and the macro aggressive behavior to which black people are exposed on a continuing basis. You have to know about their disappointments, about their disconnect, that's the word that's used quite often, because the first disconnect took place in 1619 with the arrival of the slave ships, the disconnect from all that was African. The second disconnect took place in the household, where you had black people were divided to two groups. There were those who worked in the household and those who worked out in the field, and they were different. The people who worked in the household learned the master's language, his holidays and everything. That was an alien culture. Did not help them make any adjustment because they were cut off from all that was African. And that's what's going on now. My wife used to have a problem with going to the ABPsi convention and seeing all of the African attire and the rituals and the behavior. And that's all part of the process of purifying yourself, changing your thinking, and becoming healthier based on your natural origin. But she used to, I take her to the convention, she decided, well, she's not going back anymore. All these people come in with shikis and I had this long,
Your awareness.
yes, and the cap and all that, and she just thought that was so silly. If you think about it, though, it's very healthy because it's a reflection of an evolved thinking and a value system that is changing, you know?
Now I have to say, in my mother's behalf, I will say in my mother's behalf, even though part of it is what you're talking about, because my mother, born in the South, was not raised thinking in an Afrocentric way. But the other thing about my mother and why she didn't like that is because to my mother, healing happens above being African. To my mother, healing happens based on your spirit. And that's what mommy believes in. And so part of mommy's upset is that she felt that a lot of the black psychologists were looking to man, whether that man is African or whether the man is European based on what you're studying. And for mommy, the healing is above that. So you know, I'm speaking for mommy. So that was part of it as well.
I think it's a very healthy evolution, and I think if you read Cross's explanation about the Negro to black process, at some point you have immersion and immersion. You get immersed into blackness, and you come out of it. And then you see people as they are, as they present themselves. But going through the black thing and hating white people is part of the evolution. Yeah, and you have to be patient and wait, because most black people who go into that come out of the other end of the tunnel and can relate better to people. I'm thinking, I don't know where the hell I am at 85. Because I still am very uncomfortable when I was just telling Denise coming over here, I have more time to read. I read 4 newspapers plus the New York Times every day. Every day when I read the paper, there's somebody black in the paper somewhere who's been killed or abused. And that is working on my mind. It's just so upsetting, so upsetting. You know, I said that because I like to feel that I have immersed from that black part of it. But when I read the newspapers every day, and I have all damn day to read because I've got nothing else to do. It really upsets me to read about those. For example, I was telling Denise coming over here, 2 weeks ago there was a black student somewhere in the Midwest who got 900 on the SATs. The student decided to study and do better, raised his score 300 points, and ETS refused to validate the score. You cannot cheat on the SATs unless you work at that testing company here in New Jersey. But this student raised the score 300 points, and ETS would not validate it. But there, if you read the newspapers every day, we're just victims.
Dan, just to dovetail off of that, it was a female, and she actually decided.
Was it a female?
Female.
Okay.
And she decided, just very recently, like the last couple of days or so, just to forego the legal process, to try and win, and to take it all over again. That's what she's gonna do.
She's gonna take it again?
She's gonna take it again, yeah.
That's what we require GREs for our graduate program. And, we take it, but we don't get digits. Masters, in fact, college even dropped the SATs.
She has to take it again to get into college, but I would fight that legally.
Yeah, I would.
I would hang on to that original score.
Because that's not fair.
That's just one example. If you read
Right,
the newspapers,
10,000 things like that happen all the time.
All the time, yeah.
if you read the newspapers thoroughly, every day, there's something in some newspaper every day, you know?
I have a question for you. Do you think that your sense of being black has changed since you've retired? And the reason why I say that is because my observation is that you seem more uncomfortable with white people now
Yeah.
than you were even 3 years ago when you used to work in the office.
Right.
It seems to be more, you know, and even toward the end of your practice, before you did retire, you hated going to court,
It's a
you know,
struggle.
you hated, you know, a lot of different things that before then, I know that you never loved it, but you didn't seem to be as uncomfortable with it before.
Because I had been co-opted and wasn't aware of it.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay. All right.
I'm more uncomfortable now. And it really bothers me because
Do you think the political climate has something to do with it?
certainly.
Because I'm just gonna say, it seems, because it just seems worse for everybody, you know, over the past couple of years. I mean, on all sides.
Or it's more in your face.
Right.
It's more in your face. And I think I get you, because when you give the example of the young woman who's volunteering to take the test over again, that to me is a form of racism.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
she's-
that we have to prove ourselves, we have to, you know, and it's a different form now, but that hasn't changed.
Well, she's got to do it in order to get into college.
Yeah.
I would still fight this thing legally, the original score.
Because then you get the bad feeling from the whole legal process. I mean, I think that's an individual conversation, but on a macro level, you know, moving from an individual level, you know, it's problematic, even when you talk about working with families who, white families who adopt black children. So in Montclair, we have a lot of that. So when I see, I like an all-white family who usually around adolescence, they're bringing their child in, and they haven't had any contact with black people. And like you said, you know, they don't really see blackness, and usually the child is very talented in a lot of activities, traveling all over. But really, when you sit with that child for a while, you sense they're really out of touch with their blackness. And you also sense like there's a black hatred. There's a self-hatred. And that's like trickling down from the parents who are really nice and really wealthy and trying to give the child everything. And I do believe it's out of their awareness. But that to me, that's racism, whether you're aware of it or not. It's racism, and that's why I'm mad. You know, that we still, that we have opportunities that we didn't have because of you, and the generations are improving. But it's still really bad out here. It's horrible.
Yeah. When you find, you all know that when you find racism is taught. It's not osmosis. Children are taught to hate. Black children are taught to feel good about themselves, or not to feel good about themselves. but you have to be active. It's not a passive process. You gotta teach a child that he or she can do anything.
Well, you know, they had that epigenetic research that says some of these things are passed down.
Dr.
and-
Joy said
Right,
that.
and do change our DNA in relation to thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes.
But if you know that most of our black kids who go to college have parents who did not go to college. So you don't have to have an environment where parents went to college, but you have to have parents who appreciate the importance of an education to pass that on to children. Because you can't become confident living with people who are not confident. And this is taught at the same time. I don't think we do our children a disservice if we teach them to hate white people. I don't hate anybody. Hate consumes the person who hates. Always does. But you teach children to feel good about themselves, feel that they can do anything. But the word, and I should add also that there's not an African culture, there are many African cultures, but I think, there's a lot of similarity because children raised in the same household have to have some things in common. But each culture is different. But the word, in the African literature, healing is used, not psychotherapy. Healing is the word that's used. Because they really believe that difficulties develop in people because of some distortion in some relationships. A relationship with family, relationship with the deities. And so what you have to do in therapy is talk to the client, find out about the disconnects, and help the person move towards making a better connection. As opposed to the Eurocentric, which is focusing on psychopathology. We have to focus on adaptive functioning. How does this person function? We have to know, those of us who are older, have some insight from our training about people who are really disturbed. I mean, psychotic, personality disorders. You have to be able to recognize that and make whatever adjustments you need to make in a therapeutic process. But we can't succeed with black people using a Eurocentric standard. You must have had a problem with your parents. It's crazy. We know that, for example, among black people, it is not uncommon to be raised by a grandmother. And that's not a bizarre situation. Grandmother does it because either there's a need because of the daughter or the son having to work, or grandmother can literally do a better job. Of course, I'm hesitating because if that's true, what happens to the mother who can't do the job?
Yeah. What you do just because, I think in our culture, you say, I'm the grandmother, it's what I'm supposed to do. I just never, right, crosses your mind not to do it. Even if your child, like my child, she's fine financially as a human being or whatever, but I'm her mother.
Yeah.
You don't think anything, you just do it.
And I don't know anything about white mothers and grandmothers, but black mothers and grandmothers do not make any distinction between their children and their grandchildren.
No.
They're all her children. But in terms of I don't know a better expression other than emotional disturbance, but in terms of mental illness, African belief system is that physical and mental illness is a result of distortions or disturbance in relationships, the family, deities, disturbance with the elders, and elders are extremely important people in African cultures. Elders are the intermediaries between the young person and the gods, deities. And elders are held in the highest esteem. So what is needed when working with black patients is working with, recognize that it's a healing process. And the patient or the client is an active participant. That's what makes for the friendship, I think. And what you focus on as the healer is the narrative burden. Everyone has a narrative. That simply means things about me that relate to my life and how I've lived. It becomes a burden if someone makes a negative judgment about it. For example, you ask, you're in a college setting, and you talk to a student, you want to know where are you from? You imply that the person got here through some special program. There are a lot of black students in colleges who did not get there from the EOF. They're there because they did well academically in school, and their parents are struggling to pay the bill. But you have to, as a therapist, it's a healing process, and you have to find out about the disconnects and help the client reconnect in a healthier way to his or her background. For example, and I believe there's a collective unconscious, and I did things that were African without even any awareness that I was doing those things as a therapist years ago. For example, I believe that if you have a problem in your family, then you need to work at repairing that problem. Because the relationships, family relationships are extremely important. And you can tell that when someone dies, you give the world 60 days or 30 days and they've forgotten that the person ever existed. Family never forgets. Family never forgets. Now you can't do anything within your own family because you can't be a psychologist in your family. That's crazy. Gotta let someone else do that work. You can't do that in your family. But you have to, as a healer, you have to find out what disconnects are with the client and help the person reconnect. For example, I used to send people, my clients, were you active in church? Are you going to church now? The person says, no. I said, well, you ought to think about going back. Finding a place where you're comfortable and go back and find a religion where you feel comfortable. But how can you take away that from your life if it was important to you coming up as a child? This is assuming that it was healthy coming up as a child. You know, in spite of my education and my training and my experience, I am still that little boy raised by my mother inside. And when you're in a situation that's similar to something that you went through as a child, or you get together with your siblings on an unconscious level, everybody goes back to the way they behaved when they were little girls in family. That does not go away. Family is extremely important. And the only way you can live without family is if family does not exist. And we're supposed to love each other, we're supposed to be patient with each other. We're supposed to have each other's back as family members. And we help each other. Now, mothers don't have a problem with that. Mothers spend all their damn money on their grandchildren.
Yes.
Fathers are the ones who have the problem. Mothers don't have a problem. Women, you don't have a problem being mothers, and you don't have a problem being grandmothers. The men who have the problem.
Why is that from the African theory?
I think that in most cultures, women have the responsibility of raising children. It's just a natural thing. You do it better than we do. That's the way we're socialized.
Yep, we have more oxytocin too. I think it helps us bond differently.
Well, what?
More oxytocin. You gotta bring the neuropsych.
Definitely.
You gotta bring it all in.
Mothers do a better job, even with little boys. If a little boy coming up is not attached to his mother, he got a problem. At least for X number of years. Mother becomes the most important person. What mother has to adjust to is that some place in that young boy's life, he's gonna move away from you towards his father, and that does not mean that you're rejected. You just have done all that you can do. He has to take it from here. A woman cannot make a boy into a man. That's a man's job. Now, those of us who did not have that, because my mother raised me by herself, and I don't think she did a bad job, but there was a limit to what she could do. So what has happened is that I have struggled for a lifetime, and I'm still working at being a man. However you define that. A woman cannot teach you to be a man. I got the work ethic from my mother. I got a lot of things from her. But she could not teach me to be a man. She could not do that. She didn't know a damn thing about that. And so I find myself in situations that I rarely talk about with anybody that calls for certain kinds of behavior as a father, and it's a struggle for me to do it. I do it, but it's a struggle because I did not live it and I didn't have a model from whom I learned that. And I am the spitting image of my mother in every way, because she was my world. I think that's where I got my anger from too.
She was a spitfire. She was. She was a spitfire.
Dr. Dan, I'm not even sure what my question is, but you're triggering my thinking, and I just want to, I guess, explain what's in my mind. I've been recently kind of bothered by something. You know, we have this existence here in America as Black people where, you know, racism is so blatant, and then of course in recent years it's just in our faces, and we cope with it, we deal with it, we talk about it, and we fight it. I recently went to Ghana, just got back last week from on a medical mission.
How long were you there?
Almost about 12 days. And it was a medical mission, so I had the opportunity to sit with people, work with people, and do some, you know, therapy there. But one of the things that I've been struggling with since I've been back is the fact that, you know, what I saw was a people who have been, because you talked about earlier, there's no Negroes there, right? They're kind of described based upon their country. But what I saw was a people who were still very, very oppressed by a white racist world. People who were suffering under colonialism, or the residual effects of colonialism. People who are being socialized in white-mindedness, but all the faces are Black. And so there's no perpetrator. There's no person who you can blame, who you can look at, who you can fight against. Do you follow what I'm saying? And here, we can put it somewhere, but there, it was quite different. And I've been struggling with that since I've been understanding that, trying to understand that since I've been back, and because I do plan to go again. How do you address, and how do you, I don't know.
I think it's a vestige of colonialism. You know, the first thing I saw when my wife and I went to Ghana in 2000, we spent 2 weeks there. I got off the damn plane, and the very first thing I saw in the airport was a sign for skin lightener.
Wow.
In Ghana, skin lightener.
Wow.
That comes from colonialism. But it was a fascinating people. We had our convention there in 2000, ABPsi, and we had some of our sessions were held at Ghana University. Ghana University structurally could not get a certificate of occupancy in the state of New Jersey because the buildings were so run down. But what was going on in those classrooms was absolutely amazing. But it's colonialism. You know, it's no roads.
Still blame white people.
What's that?
Still blame white people, right?
They had no.
I see that, but it
How do
seems
you
like
bring it up to
they
people who
are
don't wanna see
completely
that?
blind to it.
So it's the history, I mean, are they learning the history? Because I've had that experience too, when I went to Africa, just conversating with a woman in the airport. She was from Benin and spoke French, so in her broken French, and my, English, trying to, speak with her, she approached me and she asked me, why'd you wear your hair like that? And at that point, I had my hair short and natural, and she had her hair straight. And so I was trying to ask her, why do you wear your hair like that? But that's just an example of, I'm saying that, one of the things I'm wondering how much of the history are they learning? Because that's where they'll get it from in terms of who to blame, how are we this way? What changes do we need to make? But it's interesting and somewhat frustrating for you.
It almost made me appreciate more that it's so blatant here, if I can say
Yes,
that,
I would-
and be understood.
In spite of all,
Blatant, but I'm sorry.
in spite of all the problems in the world, I would not live any place else but here. In this country, not going no place else. I found the haven't been to England, but we interacted with a lot of English psychologists in our conventions, and I found black English psychologists are very British, very, very British, and in spite of all the problems that we have here, and they'll be here when I'm gone, and probably most of you are gone, because they're not going to be solved. I'm not going to live anyplace else. The best opportunities for me, for black people, in my opinion, are right here, in spite of the problems. There's no place like it. I've been to Cuba. I went to Cuba in 2000 and spent 2 weeks there. Mexico, Ghana, every place where you have people of color and you have white people in charge, the problems are the same. They just speak different language.
I was thinking when I heard you talk, that it sounds to me like you have an excellent opportunity. That's what came to me. I mean, even the fact that you're trained in doing those EE circles. So you have a platform and a rubric for how to introduce the topic of how do we see ourselves, or what pain do we experience because of our blackness. You have a rubric for how you might even be able to present that to them in a group format, and group and community is how they learn, you know what I'm saying, and how they interact. So I'm thinking it's not going to be one-on-one. It's going to be in a group community looking at those types of activities. And they will accept those activities from you, because my guess is, to them, black people coming from the United States, coming to them, we hold some special something to them that we don't really hold here for the rest of the people that are here. But when you go there, I mean, you're like the cat's meow. Like you're like the Grand Poobah coming in there teaching them something, right? So I think that you are perfectly equipped, given up.
The assumption is, when I say I would live anyplace else, this is the best place for me. The assumption among most American whites anyway is that this country has the best of everything, and that's absurd. There are good things in every culture, in every country. This is the best place for me. I would not live anyplace else. But the things that I saw. How long did you spend in Ghana?
12 days.
Yeah, I was there about the same time, 12, 15 days. Unpaved roads, very primitive, very poor.
Grandma still talk about the fact there was no bathrooms.
Yeah.
Have you ever asked her about the trip? That's the first thing Grandma will tell you.
We was on the same trip.
Okay.
Have you been there?
Yeah, we were on the same trip. We were on the same trip.
Her mother, you don't know, her mother is Inez Graham. She's also a psychologist.
You go first.
But the three of us were there. You want, I didn't know you.
I just want-
Yeah, I was gonna, and the thing is, we went, there was the metropolitan area, which was, you know, but then when we would take the bus trips to the different places, it was, yeah, it was.
It was depressing to me.
But what I
Yeah.
found fascinating was, as someone who's interested in young people, is when we went out, to the Asante place where all the Kente clock was and everything, and we got the local newspaper, there was like all these articles about what to do with our youth. And I was like, wow. You know, black youth even doing bad on the continent. You know, it was like the same, it would be like picking up a paper in North New Jersey. You know, and the chief was talking about this, and we need these kind of interventions, and we need mentoring, and we need all these services. And it did, you knew that the thread was the colonialism up here, but like you said, it was hard to.
I didn't think much had changed in the longest time. We were taught, when I was in school, we were taught that white people in boats kidnapped black Africans. When we went to Ghana, the Ashanti sold their people into slavery.
Oh, wow.
I was gonna say that when I was there in '94, when New Jersey did the trade mission, that was, it was kind of at the front of the mind, you know, talking about the role that was played. I think Art Presley talks about going and talking to ministers, people saying how people saying as Africans, we almost cursed ourselves. But other people were saying, we didn't know what happened to you. We didn't know, but they would not have been able to take people if they had not cooperated. And you wonder how that plays a role in what's going on there now, you know?
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm very pleased to say that we just came back as well from Ghana. And we were hosted by one of our very own folks here, Ghanaian. Our VP here is from Ghana.
Put in a group.
Barbara.
Prempeh there.
Oh, nice.
It's from
Oh,
Ghana.
we're talking about you.
And I want to say, one of the things that struck me, we were there like 9 days or so. So I have two pieces that I wanted to respond to. One, what I was struck by was the work ethic. If anyone's been to Ghana, if you stop on Trotro, you know, the little, there are 50 people, these women with like a whole store on their heads that balance them. It just amazes me, little kids with these stores on their head, where they would go and sell you whatever you needed. You know, there'd be rolls of everything and anything on their heads. But we'd go someplace for the day, early morning, we'd see folks, all these women primarily, selling everything, right? And we'd come in at dusk. If your car stopped, people would come up to you. I was like, well, when do people go home? When do they, I mean, and my point is that, you know, I didn't see, and I don't know, you know, much about it, but I understand from Barbara as well, that there aren't social welfare programs because people take care of themselves. They grow what they need, they fix what they need, they you know, have the animals, so they're really self-sufficient. You know, so even you don't see a lot of homelessness. We stayed in Brussels for 4 days afterward. We saw beggars on the street. We didn't see that when we were in Accra. We didn't see that. So there was this strong work ethic. There were people who were taking care of themselves, taking care of their families, and rather than poverty, and I saw people, we went to at Winneba, and people were there in little villages, and I did my ancestry, so my mother's side is strong there. Like, that's primarily where we're from. My father has a strong percentage as well. But I could see my folks generations ago coming from that, in their tight communities, there's music blaring, goats in the street, chickens in the street, people doing whatever. They didn't seem distressed. You know, we, I think, impose our own, you know, perception of impoverished, of poor. I didn't see poverty. I saw people living their lives when there was no infrastructure for roads, et cetera, right? So people, we couldn't believe it. I was like, my tires would never, I'd have 50 tires a week that would need to be. But I'm saying the perspective and perception of what we have here, when we see, you know, like ghettos, you know, I didn't see that there. So the second piece of what I wanted to say was, I agree with Dr. Dan and this colonialism, because when we went to Elmina. We went to Cape Coast where the castle was, etc. We had a wonderful tour guide, and we bought his book as well. And he talked about the distinction between the African slave traders, and they weren't. They were, selling their own folks, and the European slave traders, and the brutality that was inflicted by the Europeans that was never ever part of what happened when there were trades amongst Africans. The people who were Africans and who were traded among tribes and different cultures were able to marry within the culture. They were able to become part of the family. There was never this brutality and dehumanization that happened that was brought on with Europeans. So it was a very different type of trade and selling of folks. You could become whoever you wanted. If they saw talent in your family, you could become that, even though you were sold off to, pay a debt. So I think our perspective and this colonization, I think, is what continues, with what happened, and the wealth continues to be taken out of countries, etc. But I think the perspective is real important because it's not an impoverished area like we have here.
They also take care of each other. But another point about, we went to Cape Coast, the castle from which slaves were shipped. And in the courtyard, in this courtyard at the castle, there was a church. And all this slave trade was done in the name of God. Which reminds me of a quote from Jomo Kenyatta in 1963. He was the Prime Minister of Kenya from 63 to 64, and president from 64 until he was killed in 74. This is what he made a statement one day. He says, the missionaries came and brought their Bibles. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. And when we open our eyes, they had the land and we had the Bible.
Right. Wow.
Absolutely.
Which is the story of colonialism.
Absolutely.
But the Ghanaians are very, very different people, very different people. I came back and did a lot of reading about .com, that I'm 21% Ghanaian.
Hey, brother man.
But in terms of the slave trade, most of the slave traders came to Virginia, but there was also a steady route from Ghana to Mobile, Alabama. Was another slave route, and I know that because that's where I was born. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this thing and get somebody to edit it and try to get a monograph and send it to you so you can read it and get more out of it than I was able to do today. Put it in form. The monograph, I think, takes more. You have more latitude